Part of this, now's the time to come in, we're going to have to begin. We have a very full program tonight, so we're not going to do a lot of the things that we normally do. But one of the two things that we are going to do is we're going to begin this meeting with a prayer, as we always do. Terrace Todd, would you like to lead us in prayer?
Let's pray. Father, we thank you again for another day. We thank you for grace. We thank you for mercy. We pray, Lord, your blessing over this meeting tonight. We pray that your Spirit will continue to lead and guide us in all truth. We pray your blessing over each and every family that's represented here tonight as well. We pray again, Lord, that you would continue to speak the truth in love. We pray your blessing over each and every one of these candidates and everything that they set their hands to. We give you praise and glory in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Dr. And Dave Morgan, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Normally, we take a few minutes and we allow our local representatives to say hello and to inform us on anything new that's going on. They usually have a couple of minutes to do that. Tonight, we're not going to be able to do that. We just simply do not have the time. But there is one thing I want to bring to your attention, and I'm going to ask Keith Van Hollander to tell us about it. Keith, will you take just a couple of quick minutes?
Thanks, Steve. For those of you that haven't heard, we do have a speaker and a date for our Reagan Day dinner. We are getting a the Calhoun County Republicans. Now is the time to get your membership, because some of those memberships include tickets and VIP access. So if you're not a member, there are envelopes out on the table. If you are a candidate here tonight and you're interested in finding out about ads in the program, front cover, back cover, things like that, you might want to jump on those while they're hot, because I'm sure they're going to go quickly, and we'll put together package deals for you if you want tickets and ads and a table for your campaign materials and so forth. So if you have interest in that, please see me, see Jeannie Birchfield, our Calhoun County Chair, and we'll be happy to get that for you. There is an event on Facebook for the event already. I will get a Transact page link to that by this time tomorrow with tickets available. So
Now, let me see what's on this list. I'm going to go through it real quick before we get the night started. Normally speaking, or I don't want to say normally speaking, I want to say always, our meetings are free and they're open to the public. But we do have to rent this room. We have a few other expenses. So what we normally do is we send a little jug around, and if you've got an extra $100 bill, you can send it. We would appreciate it. Okay?
Can I piggyback a jug on that one?
Whatever you can do, we appreciate it. And, all right, you've seen on your seat a newspaper called the Heartland Herald, and if you are having trouble finding a conservative newspaper, that is a conservative newspaper. We came across it in Florida. It's printed in Florida. We have 1,000 of them sent up here to us every month, and we distribute those. And if you want to read something that has conservative news in it, which you don't see in other newspapers, I suggest you read that. And I also suggest that you give us a hand in distributing those. Grab a handful, grab 20, and pass them out to your neighbors, your family, your church members, your fellow workers, whatever. But we believe, we being the Calhoun County Tea Party, that this next election is going to be settled on issues, not personalities. And issues are in that paper, and it is what we're going to be doing in the next year, 2020, preparing for that election. Now, with that, I just want to say that this is our last meeting for this year. Okay? We won't have another meeting until January the 23rd. And that's because, as all of you who are members know, that our meeting is always the fourth Thursday of each month. In November, that's Thanksgiving. In December, that's Christmas. So this will be our last meeting. We'll be back in January. Everybody will get notices to when and what's going on. I appreciate you coming tonight. We've got some fine candidates here, and we've got our good friend Rain to host this debate for us. So I'm going to turn it over to Rain. It's your show, Rain.
Well, let's start this party off, especially since it's the last party of the year. I want to thank all of you guys for coming, and especially you guys. I understand that you're far away, a lot of you from the Grand Rapids area, but as we told them, we wanted them to come and meet this southern end of their district here. They'll be running, obviously, you all know, in the 3rd Congressional District to, we don't know yet who they're going to be running against. It'll be one of them in the primary, when they win the primary, against whoever the Democrats put up. And the current Congressman Amash has not announced what he's doing yet, if he's going to either run or run for president, who knows. So, what I want to do here is I want this to rock and roll as quick as possible because we have a lot of questions to go through, and we also want to try to get you guys some opportunity at about 8:30 to actually ask some of your own questions. So I'm going to try to keep my mouth shut as much as possible, which is not easy for a radio talk show host, but I will try and let these guys speak where what they need to tell you guys. They introduce themselves to you guys for the first time. And as I told some of these guys, and I think they know, this is a room of Tea Partiers, so I don't know, it looks like we have maybe 90, 100 right now, something like that. And these are all influencers. They're going to talk to other people when you start listening to what these guys are saying. I've always said that whenever I've attended these meetings, you've got to spread the word. You can't let it sit right here with just you guys here. All right? So, let me real quickly go through the format, then introduce everyone who's up here. The format's this. I'm going to be asking questions, the same question, obviously, for all of them to answer. 3 minutes is what you'll get to answer the question. I think you guys know the format. Here, if you can see, we do have an actual timer. We're professional here. Dave Morgan will be doing the timing. And please try to stick to the 3 minutes because there's a lot of questions that I think you guys need to get your thoughts out to these people where you're at. I also, when it comes to rebuttal, if there is a rebuttal, I guess I get to decide. They told me if we want a rebuttal or not. And I don't expect too many of them because I will not accept anybody fighting with each other. That's not where there's at here. You guys don't even know each other enough yet to start to hating on each other. And so I'm hoping that we just keep this fast and furious and no attacking anybody, because if you do or you go way too long, is that what you guys will hear, and then you will be off. I specifically asked for that because I'm not loud enough. So 3 minutes for an introduction, 3 minutes for questions. If there needs to be a rebuttal, maybe a minute, I'll let you know. And closing statements, 2 minutes. The sections we're going to try to cover as fast as possible, and as you can see, I'm even going as quick as I can here, is the economy, the Second Amendment, red flag laws, health care, trade and tariffs, immigration, which includes the southern border and sanctuary cities, and then I have a couple general questions that I'll ask you guys up there. With that said, let's start this rock and roll show right now. Right here, I'd like you to introduce the candidates in the Republican primary for Michigan's 3rd Congressional District, and you can hold your applause until after. Pete Meijer, State Rep Lynn Afendoulis, Tom Norton, Joel Langlois, darn it. And see, that's why I go by rank. I was telling Lynn, I go by rank because my last name is it would be tough. And State Rep Jim Lauer. So I'd like you guys to give them a hand because they didn't take their time to come down here tonight. I'm losing my mic.
You lost your mic.
The
Radio show host about mic.
The heck
We'll
is
take
this?
that.
No, you guys need a mic. Let's start. We never draw numbers or whatever, who gets to go first?
Well, we can just go left or right, right to left, middle out, I don't care.
We can always go youth before beauty.
No, because then I'll be taking over the whole time then, and we don't want to do that, youth before beauty or anything. All right, let's start I'm going to go from the right, since a lot of us are from the right, and but now, is that Jim or Pete? I don't know.
Yes.
All right, what number do I? Okay, let's start with Pete here. Pete, I want you to introduce yourself real quickly. 3 minutes will be on the timer, and you'll see it goes at 30 seconds. It goes to yellow. 30, right, Dave?
Yep.
It goes to yellow and then red at the end.
Thank you, Rank, and thank you everybody for coming out here tonight. My name is Peter Meijer, and I'm running for Congress here in our 3rd Congressional District. I was born and raised in Grand Rapids, 4th generation West Michigander, and I've really committed my life to service, and my run for Congress is a continuation of that. After graduating from high school, I served in the Army. I did intelligence work in Iraq, came back, worked in disaster response and humanitarian aid organizations around the world, working in the Philippines and South Sudan, and spending a good deal of time in Afghanistan, again, on the other side of the glass wall. And so I've seen what these conflicts are like. I've seen the path that they're going down. And I was honestly thrilled to hear then candidate Donald Trump, now President Trump, and his commitment to pulling our troops back from overseas. I think we've seen in the past week how many Republicans who say they support ending these wars, even if they agree 95% with that objective, they'll find 5% to find fault. And that's not the type of person that I am. I want to get these jobs accomplished. I'm running so we can bring this home, so we can take the momentum that the president has created and drive that forward for generations to come. Because this is a tremendous opportunity. It's an opportunity in our district to say, what do we want our representation to look like, not just for 2 years, but what is that path we're setting forward? But it's also an opportunity to begin to peel back the federal overreach that the president has attacked full-heartedly. This is the first administration in 40 years that has seen a decrease in the size of the combined federal register. Every other administration has increased that by at least 5 to 10%. We have an opportunity because the Democrats are running as far as they possibly can to the left, and they're leaving a lot of folks, frankly, a lot of folks in my generation, they're leaving us in the middle. We have an opportunity to bring them over to our side, to bring them to the right, to show that we can build a future based on our shared conservative principles and find solutions to rising healthcare costs, find solutions to the environmental problems that the left wants to completely reorder our society in order to change it. But I think we can find market-based solutions and also solve the immigration problem, right? It used to be a bipartisan consensus that we need to secure our southern border, and they keep shifting these goalposts to the left, to the left, to the left. I think we can bring that back. We can get all the folks and the younger generations and show them that the Republican Party has the solutions that we can build a new conservative future on, and I hope we can start that fight here in West Michigan. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Lynn Afendoulis, and I am grateful to be here. I'm grateful that we have such a great audience, so thank you for being here as well. I am a mom. I'm a Christian. I am a businesswoman. I am a community leader, an engaged community leader, and I am a legislator. And I have lived in this community, in this area all my life. It's where I raised my children, it's where I have worked, it's where I have engaged in solutions, and it's the area that I love so much. My father was a small businessman, my mother was a teacher.
I went to school at Michigan State University and got my degree in journalism. I was a reporter for the Grand Rapids Press for a while, and then at the Tampa Tribune until I went into business. And for the past 26 years, I worked for a business in Grand Rapids. And in 2018, ran for the first time for office and was honored to be elected. So here I am. Loving the community that I love and seeing it neglected by its own representative. I have known this community and I have seen previous representatives do what it takes to represent a community in Washington, D.C., to get to know the people, to get to know the issues, to help figure out solutions, and to be their voice in Washington. And we haven't had that for a very long time. There are 733,000 people in this district, and to be a good representative of all of them, I have to get out and engage in the communities, and this is the thing that I love to do. I love meeting with people, I love getting to know them, I love getting to know problems and issues and figuring out how to solve them best. That's what I intend to do as your state representative. I intend to bring you to Washington, D.C. with me. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Tom Norton. I was the first candidate that filed for the 3rd Congressional seat before it was cool to run against Justin Amash. So I didn't wait for Twitter. I'm actually a leader. I was an operations NCO in the Army. My MOS was 11 Bravo, which is infantry. So my background in the military is more boots on the ground. But I come from a little bit different of a background than most of the other folks. I was raised on a farm. I literally plowed fields, we had cows, we had chickens, everything else. My father, on top of farming, worked 3rd shift at Meyer's. Literally. So I was taught hard work and dedication by that family. And we've always heard people tell us, you came from nothing, you came from nothing. And there's something that I've decided to embrace. It's coming from everything. The actual American background. Each one of us have had family members who worked in a factory, who've tilled fields, who've joined the military and served their country. What Donald Trump represents to this nation is a rebirth of what we used to be. That it's not about where you come from, it's about what you're able to accomplish yourself. We are in a fight, not about left versus right, about Americanism versus socialism. That's why the Blue Dog Democrats have been voting for Republicans. That is the fight that we are in. It is so that my children who are sitting in the back can go further than I did. So that your children can go further than you, and so on and so forth. That is what America is. That's why Make America Great Again, that's what it means. It means that all of us can actually move forward and fight. And the problem that we have is that we are losing in our schools. We're losing in the public arena because we don't know how to fight back. We're letting our leaders be bullied by Democrats and socialists everywhere. And they're sitting there and they're pounding you and you're name calling. You have people that won't stand up on red flag gun laws. Look at this impeachment process. I was the only candidate in this room that actually set a video supporting the president during this entire impeachment thing, because they're probably waiting to see how it was going to fall out because their consultants told them what it was. Only one that stood up for red flag gun laws. Why? Because it's real leadership in order to fight socialism so that we can actually take back America and continue to do it for the next generation. Because the real question, folks, who's going to be fighting for the United States when Donald Trump is gone? That's right.
Hello, my name is Joel Langlois. I'm a lifelong West Michigan resident. And there's 3 things I'd like you to remember about me. First thing is that I have a strong work ethic. I grew up on the north side of Grand Rapids. I worked, like Tom, I worked in farms, picking apples, picking strawberries, baling hay, doing the stuff that you do on farms. I started my first business at 18 years old. I grew that business, and I was in many other businesses after that. The second thing I want you to remember about me is that I have real-world experience. In the last 40 years, I have been a businessman in West Michigan, and I have experience. I have experience employing families. I say that I employ families because every person that I employ takes their money home to their family, and so I take that responsibility very seriously. I mortgaged my house to make sure that my payroll was met for my businesses, and I signed the front side of paychecks. I have real-world experience that I bring in. The third thing that I want you to remember about me is that I am a strong supporter of the president. I was a supporter on day one. I've not been a never Trumper like some of the other candidates. I've always been a supporter of the president. When the president decided to run, it was really encouraging to me as a businessman. I thought this is about time that we got rid of career politicians and those people in Washington that don't understand what it's like that all the people here and in our real world have to experience. So when he decided to run, I own the Deltaplex in Grand Rapids, and I reached out to him and I invited him over to hold a rally at my building. Many of you people probably were at that rally in December of 2015. What a great experience. We filled that building up, and we had people lined up outside the building that couldn't get in. And it was a great experience, and it was a kickoff for Michigan to help the president win the state of Michigan. Earlier this year, Justin Amash came out and decided he supported the impeachment of our president. It was a sad day for me. I expected conversation like that from the Democrats, but I never expected it from somebody on our team. And Justin came out, and I went to his town hall right after he had that, and I heard Justin say that it was not his job to represent his district, it was his job to defend the Constitution. Well, in my book, your job is both of those things. If you're not going to represent, then you shouldn't be in office. And so I decided it was time to run. I took that and I decided to run. I think I'm the best candidate for this job based on the three things I want you to remember. That I have a strong work ethic, I have real world experience, and I want to bring that to Washington to solve problems. So I appreciate your support, and it's beeping at me, so I got to stop talking. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Jim Lauer. I've met several of you before, back in I believe it was Meyer, June, we were down here, but I'll still go through my background. I was born in Grand Rapids, raised in Ionia County. I have a wife, Kristen, and two small kids at home. A little late for them this evening, so they've got to be in bed by about 8 o'clock. And we're proud to be raising our family in a very Christian household, a very pro-life household. We're both Catholic and attend Mass regularly. And I grew up also in a working class family. My father actually worked at Electrolux for a number of years. Before that, went to Mexico, and that was one of the reasons that helped me decide that I wanted to be involved in public service and in public office, but also why I bought into President Trump's message so quickly, because he was talking about NAFTA and how bad that had been for not only states like Michigan, but just the United States in general. And I'd lived that story. I'd lived out, my father being laid off and the community that we call home, a lot of people being laid off and losing their jobs and trying to figure out what the future would hold for them. So I've been through that. That's one of the reasons I support the president, one of many. What I do for a living now, I'm a state representative in my second term for the 70th district. And I was gearing up to challenge Congressman Amash even before he came out for impeachment. We were getting ready to run because he's been very ineffective. Like, never mind the stuff he's done against President Trump. I think that's important that we're talking about that, and that's what really tipped the scale and got my wife and I on board with going forward with this. But a lot of the premise of my campaign was going to be, and it's still about, it's about the fact he's been very ineffective. In 10 years in Congress, the only bill he's gotten signed into law was to rename a post office. Contrast that with my first term in the State House. I was able to get 10 bills signed into law. These weren't highway renaming bills, and these weren't bills to expand the government. They were actually bills to do everything that we talk about as Tea Party Republicans, as conservatives. Getting the government out of the way of people trying to get jobs. I did a major reform, keeping local governments from putting additional licensing on employers and on people looking for jobs. Property tax reform, that was a huge win and something that was very controversial at the time, but made it a lot better for people. So what I think I bring to the table is, how can I help Trump the best? How can I help Trump better than some of these other candidates? It's because I know how to work that process and get things done without being a career politician. I've been in office for 3 years, something I've spent a lot of time grooming those skills, and it's tough. It's tough in Lansing, and it's tough in Washington, D.C. as well. So if you elect me, I'll be able to go down there and I'll be in a great position to help President Trump implement his agenda, like building the border wall. He's been the most pro-life president in my generation, probably in a really long time. We need to do more on that, though. We need to do more on that at the state level. We also need to do more on that at the national level, as you see what the Democrats are doing in states like New York and around the country. So those are a few of my priorities. I think we need to refocus on the national debt. It's something Congressman Amash talked about. Frankly, a lot of people in here, including myself, really supported his agenda in 2010 and 12, and as he was starting out running, because he was talking about those issues. But unfortunately, the national debt and the deficit have gotten bigger, not smaller, during his time in office. He hasn't been able to provide the type of leadership on that we need, and that's something that I want to do. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, guys. I appreciate that. Let's get into the questions. And the questions were formulated to give just a flavor right now where you guys are at, so these guys understand the positions you may be taking if you were to move on, win the primary, and then go ahead and win the general election. Let's hope one of you wins the general election. Whoever wins the primary, that's for sure. And I hope you don't end up like Justin Amash, who begged to come on my show monthly for forever until he became a never Trumper hater, and now you can't even, I could rarely find where he is, and he never responds to any requests anymore, because I guess I'm not CNN or MSNBC or something like that. Now, that being said, let's start with the economy, and let's go with, we'll just kind of like move down one at a time. So you started off, we'll start with Lynn. Lynn, how much should any government unit be involved with directing our economy? So generally, what do you see, all you guys see, as the role government has to do within an economy? All right, 2 minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes. Well, thank you for the question. Well, I am a limited government person, and I think that our government has grown way beyond its scope and way beyond its necessity, and we are doing things that we ought not be doing, and that's why our deficit is what it is. That's why we have the challenges that we do right now. And I think that, frankly, I would support a balanced budget amendment. I think we need to get to that point so that we're not spending our children's dollars and our grandchildren's dollars and beyond that. I mean, this is spending out of control. So I think that I'm a limited government person. I think that the president has done a lot of things that have supported this economy in great ways. He has strengthened us on an international scale. He has done some tax reform that's been very important for us. He's making some tough decisions around tariffs, so that those are tough decisions. Some of that is short-term pain for long-term gain, so it's like a gain for some of that. So I support what he's been doing. You can't argue with success. We are sitting in an economy that's pretty strong, and I would support the president's continuing efforts.
All right, thank you very much. Let's go to Tom. Tom, as I was saying, what do you see as the role of government in an economy?
The role of government in an economy should be to get the heck out of the way. Period. Let's look at the DEQ, for instance. How many different levels of DEQ are there? You have a state DEQ, you have a federal DEQ, you might have a county DEQ, you might have a local city DEQ. Why in God's green earth can't we just have one department that you walk into the building, you get your DEQ approval form, and you can go down there and start opening your business? In Taiwan, you can walk into one building and start a business within 2 hours. In the United States, it might take you 6 weeks just to get the planning done. So government needs to get out of the way so that businesses can be successful. That needed to happen before Donald Trump, and Donald Trump's removing regulations. That's why the economy is exploding. It's not just the tax reforms that he's done. It's a reduction in regulations that are actually occurring and that business owners can see happening on a daily basis. So to me, the government needs to get out of the way there. There's one instance. The other part is when we get into trade, as long as trade is fair both directions, that's where tariffs come in. If one country's manipulating on the other side, that's not fair trade at all. I'm okay with free trade if both sides are following the same rules. And that's what Donald Trump's applying. So we need to get out of the way with business as much as we can, where all Americans are going to benefit, where everybody has the opportunity to succeed without somebody putting their thumb down on them with regulations.
Thank you. You know what, I want to add, I have a second question here that I'm going to ask. Let's go to Lynn real quickly, and then she can add this if she'd like. And then, Tom, you could address it, because I was going to separate it, but we're kind of mixing a little bit here. One of the biggest concerns people had, business owners from all over my listening area would contact me, won't tell you who, off the record, with Justin Amash, is he didn't care about the 3rd District. He didn't try to work with anybody in the 3rd District, and business owners cutting through the politics of it all, they were just really, really unhappy with Amash. And so if you would like to, how will you assure those businesses that you're there for the district? Yes, I understand, his, I'm here for the Constitution, and we'd all like that. It's kind of like what I say when it comes to de-arming yourselves with Ohio giving tax breaks, but Michigan not. Who are businesses going to go to? But it does come down to the district that they're representing. So Lynn, real quickly, I'm just informing you, businesses were not happy, and Joel, you may have been one of them, and they came to me in droves, telling me they can't stand, they wanted me to intercede, they wanted me to speak to Justin about this. Well, what are your thoughts about that? And then we'll get to Tom real quickly, like 30 seconds if you can, and then Joel.
Yeah, I don't think it's rocket science. This is about getting to know your constituents and getting to know your businesses and getting to know their issues and being a problem solver and bringing them back to Washington. This is about returning phone calls. This is about answering your constituents. These are the things that Justin did not do. So, I think that that's really about engaging with your community. And if we don't, that's the role of a representative.
All right, thank you. You want to add to that then, because you did last time?
Yeah, not a problem on that. So one of the reasons
30 seconds though.
The main reason I filed to run was constituent relations. It's not just business owners that are getting ignored. Veterans were getting ignored by Justin Amash, which is one of the main reasons I filed to run, that I've been hitting home constantly. We can sit there and we can complain about just the business aspect, but it's the human aspect as well, where all of us matter, not just the person with the biggest checkbook.
All right, thanks. All right, thanks, Joel. Now the full thing. Both questions kind of rolled into each other. Your thought of how government works within the economy, or what it should be there for, and then the whole part that I just spoke of concerning your constituents. Of which you were one of his business constituents.
Yeah. To answer the first part of the question, I'm a free market guy. I think businesses operate the best if they're left to operate their business. And regulation, the president's done a great job of rolling back regulation, tax reform, doing all those things. Obviously, our economy has been on fire since President Trump has had the opportunity to operate. So I think, again, government, limited government, defining government, we need to define what government is there for. Some of the things that they do, Department of Education, there's a whole bunch of things that government has no business being in and spending tax dollars. Obviously, we could go on and on about that, but the role of government is to get out of the way, let businesses do what they're going to do. As far as representation goes, I have a real quick story. I have a very close friend of mine who was in Vietnam. He had a Purple Heart when injured. He now has terminal cancer. He's getting close to death. He never got his medal. He tried calling Justin Amash's office time and time again to get his medal. And he called me and said, "What do I do?" I said, "Call Bill Huizenga." And he called Bill Huizenga, and within 2 days he had a medal in his hand. And that's the kind of lack of representation that Mr. Amash has given us. We all need to do better. I'm here to represent. I think that's a very important part of what you do, representing the district. So that's what I'm going to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Jim?
So the question was, what's the government's role in the economy? And I think one of the most important things, at least at the federal level, is trade. President Trump ran on putting America first in these trade deals, and as I mentioned in my intro, that's something that I put on the top of my list for priorities as well, because we absolutely have to put American businesses and American workers well ahead of China or Mexico or Canada or any of our trade partners. We still do have to have trade. So that'd be a big one. Infrastructure and national security, I think they go hand in hand, but infrastructure is something that is definitely a role of the government, and it's something that helps all businesses and all people that live in, whether it be Battle Creek or anywhere in the 3rd Congressional District. So I think that is something that we've done a good job at the state level, investing more and more taxpayer dollars in without raising them. The governor wants to 45-cent gas tax increase. We sent our budget with a huge increase in infrastructure spending that she, of course, vetoed because it didn't have a tax increase. But you can do that. You can find room in the budget. The federal government budget is way, way bigger. So there's plenty of room for infrastructure in the federal government budget. I also want to talk about maybe not that sexy of an issue, but the money supply. That's something that the federal government's very involved in. They're printing more and more money all the time. That goes to this issue of the deficit and the national debt. That is an issue that definitely will be impacting our economy in the years to come because it causes inflation as you print more and more money. So that's something that I think we need to keep a better eye on at the national level. And then to go to the question about, how am I going to advocate for the 3rd District and how would I do that better than Congressman Amash? I think we need to look no further than this area when we lost out on a big investment in the military base because Congressman Amash was unwilling to work with other House Republicans or just Republicans in general. So we lost out on what would have been a great economic development for this area in particular. So, you know, building those relationships with other members like Congressman Huizenga, Congressman Molinar, a lot of them talked about, they even sent a letter, you know, basically calling out Amash for losing this base for Michigan and for his district in particular. So I think that's something that we need to do a better job at in the 3rd District, is being in a position to work with the president to get those kinds of investments from the federal government.
All right, thank you, Jim. Pete?
So I'm with Tom. The role of the federal government should be to get out of the way, except in places where someone's getting taken advantage of, like China taking advantage of the U.S. on all sorts of intellectual property theft and other issues. But I think when the federal government puts themselves in a position to be picking winners and losers, they are letting larger companies take advantage of smaller companies. Because regulation and complexity, that is a subsidy to a big corporation that can afford lawyers and accountants and all the folks who have the ability to fund things that they can interact with the government for. And a small business and entrepreneur, they can't afford to do that. That's a tax. It's a tax that doesn't go into the pockets of the federal government to be spent on national security. It's just a tax that goes from small businesses and entrepreneurs to lawyers and accountants. Now, I think when it came to Representative Amash's principles on the federal government's role in the economy, he said the right things. He said that we should have a limited federal government, that the government shouldn't be picking winners and losers. He was against the Export-Import Bank, which provided financing to very large corporations, but put a lot of smaller businesses at a disadvantage. But he didn't walk that walk when it came to working with the folks in the 3rd District, because every issue that a business in the 3rd District raised where they had a problem working with the federal government, I mean, that is, a congressman should be taking note of every single one of these issues and saying, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? Because that is a failure of the system, that is a fault that needs to be corrected, and it's more evidence of how we need to reorganize how our federal government's role, and not only in the economy, but in our lives more general, how that works. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that, guys. You know, that's the whole state with the economy right now. To all of you guys, I would like to say real quickly 2 things. I have been told, someone of you guys brought it up about the missile defense system. I have been told by 2 people in D.C. that one of the biggest reasons they believe we did lose, we still might get it, but looks like we're going to lose the missile defense system, is because of Justin Amash. Yes, Justin, you. Because of you is what they said. Everybody's human. You anger some people, you catch, what do they say? You catch more flies with honey, right? All right, so now let's go to the Second Amendment. And on the Second Amendment, I suspect all of you guys are for the Second Amendment, so I'm literally, hopefully looking for something a little bit deeper than that. So what I came up with, what does the Second Amendment mean to you? How far will you go to protect our constitutional rights? And what are your thoughts on the recent red flag laws? Well, Tom, you've already talked about that a little bit. I don't know, should we take some of his time away, maybe? I don't know, since he's already brought it up. But anyway, so what does it mean to you? How far will you go to protect our constitutional right? And what are your thoughts on the recent push for red flag laws? For those of you who don't know what the red flag laws are, it's here in the United States, it's a gun control that'll let police take away your guns when a family member, someone thinks that your family member is not all there. Let's say, it's kind of like maybe an Amash support. Oh wait, sorry, Tanis. All right, I'm needling Tanis there. Anyway, not all there, and there are serious troubles that they're going to have to. They're worried about the safety of themselves as well as others. That's what the red flag laws are. So, Tom, you're first.
Okay, first, I might have to ask a crowd a question. Who has not seen my Second Amendment video or my red flag videos? Okay, about half. Okay, go to nortonforcongress.com or Tom Norton for Congress Facebook. I have a couple very, very clear videos on it. Anyway, the Second Amendment is there to actually defend all of your other rights. That is the entire point of it. It is there to defend freedom of speech. It is there to make sure that we have the right to peaceably assemble. It is there to make sure that we have due process of law. So what red flag gun laws actually accomplish is eradicating due process of law and taking away that right. If I can take away your due process of law, now I can take away your Second Amendment. If you sit there and you look where the United States has gone, every single time there's a socialist program, as Reagan once said, nothing is closer to eternal life than a government program. So if they start these red flag gun laws coming through, they're going to come through, and then eventually they're going to take guns one step at a time based upon a phone call. That's the problem with them. There is an actual setup for a due process of law, like somebody misuses a weapon. And red flag gun laws haven't stopped mass shootings. The first state to pass a red flag gun law was Connecticut in the 1990s. They've had some mass shootings since then, haven't they? It hasn't saved a single life. As a matter of fact, there's been more people killed on the enforcement of red flag gun laws than people saved because of red flag gun laws. But we aren't going to be talking about that because it's not couth to the left. And they don't want to talk about what that is. But the Second Amendment is there to defend the rest of our rights. It's there so the government is scared of us, not us scared of the government. Period.
Thank you, Tom. And I do want to thank all of you guys for respecting the time, because we're trying to get as much out there for your benefit to explain to people what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so Second Amendment, I didn't carry my gun in, they're out in the car. I carry a gun, I have a concealed weapons permit, had that for a long time. The whole Second Amendment, I don't know what's confusing about shall not be infringed to some of the people in our world. Second Amendment is an absolute right, it's a need, and as Tom said, there's reasons for it. The reality is what we have to do as conservatives is we have to look at the narrative. The narrative of the left is what's talking about gun confiscation, buyback programs, red flag laws, all that stuff. That narrative is being controlled by them. The reality is these people that are going out and shooting up other people, it's a mental health issue. That's what we need to talk about. It's not, the gun is not pulling the trigger. It's the individual who has a mental health problem. That's what we need to work on. We can't, you can show me one gun law, no matter what it is, that is going to stop any of these shootings and not have to consider it. But it hasn't happened. You can't tell me that a guy that walks up to a Walmart store with a gun, getting ready to shoot people, says, oh, guns are prohibited here, so I'm not going in and shooting. Well, that's not how it works, folks. They go in and they don't represent, they don't care about the law. So it's only the people that care about laws are the ones that are affected by this kind of stuff. So again, it's a mental health issue, it's not a gun issue, and we need to reinforce that with the public. It's a mental health issue. Let's get the mental health program fixed. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Something I like that you say is that you said, tell me a gun law that would stop it. And that's a good way to address people real quickly, if I may. So I want to help these guys understand. When you're out there, if you're at a far lefty, forget about it. Walk away. Just do what I do. I kind of smile. And I walk away. If there's someone who's reasonable out there, you make reasonable arguments like that. Tell me a gun law that you think would work. Real quickly, really today on my show, a guy calls in, he was all upset at me because I wrote that article about my opinion piece about Justin Amash not caring if people lie when he wouldn't sign the censure agreement. He was the only person other than all the Democrats that didn't. And then he said, well, Trump lies all the time. He lied like 40-something thousand times. I said, tell me one that he lied on. You see what I'm saying? And then you don't get in arguments with them, but that was a good point, Joel. You say, okay, what works? What do you think will work? And they won't come up with anything, and then they'll walk away. I'm sorry to take the time, but I like to try to also engage and teach people how to get our principles, and that's one of the questions I'm going to, come out across, our principles across to people, and I like what I'm hearing here. Thanks, Jim. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much. So you asked, what does the Second Amendment mean to me? It's very important to me. I grew up in a household where we had guns readily available, and I was taught to respect those weapons and also how to use them. In my runs for state representative, I'm A+ rated from the NRA. I'm a lifetime endowment level member, CPL holder. I've held a CPL ever since I was old enough to have one. I was endorsed by Great Lakes Gun Advocacy Group, which they're considered more conservative than the NRA in a lot of cases. They've supported me in prior elections. So I think that's a good contrast with some of these other candidates that have run before, that NRA voting record and A+ rating. But on these red flag laws, it's something that I agree with a lot of what was said. I think that, they sound good in the paper, but at the reality of it is there's no due process, and they'd be very bad for our society. So it's not something that I would ever support in any way, shape, or form. So, but what does it mean to me? I think it means the Second Amendment is there to protect all the other amendments and the Constitution. It's really to keep the government from having an astronomical amount of power over us as the people. And if you look at it, deer season's coming up, November 15th, there'll be armed people in the woods, larger than most armies on the face of the earth. And there's going to be maybe a couple of accidents, but nobody's going to start shooting, and there's not going to be any problems with it, and that happens every single year. So penalizing law-abiding gun owners and citizens is not the way to go about it. It's clearly the left just wants to confiscate our guns. They call it a buyback program, but they never owned it to begin with, so it's not really a buyback. They have these creative ways of phrasing it to make it sound appealing. Well, it's not. It's nothing more than a gun confiscation program, and it's something that I absolutely will never support.
Thank you, Jim. I like your analogy there. Hunters.
Yeah, so the Second Amendment to me, to get to Joel's point about the narratives, the left says, oh, well, how could you ever use this in self-defense? Well, you can't use this for hunting. That's not what the Second Amendment is for. It is a check against a tyrannical government. Full stop. It's so that we can reset that social contract if the government takes things too far, if the government begins breaking its own laws. And I think we've all seen enough about what's happened in the past couple of years to see where the Democrats are going, to see Beto O'Rourke starting off saying, oh, no, of course, we would never want to confiscate, and then the mask coming off, the facade falling down. No, he wants to take your AR-15. And I guarantee that sentiment is very widely shared. I have a concealed pistol license. I proudly support and defend those rights. I was on the Army pistol team. I've never not shot expert on a pistol. I love my 6 hour. I think that's something that we need to have more of. When it comes to protecting at the federal level, it's making sure that we keep that reciprocity going of CPL licenses between the states, that we enforce and show that we can be responsible gun owners, and that is something to be celebrated, not something to be denigrated by the left. When it comes to red flag laws, we saw this in the military with folks who sought mental health concerns after they came back from a conflict. It started to show up negatively on their security clearances. That was a red flag. What happened? People who needed help didn't seek help. Suicide rates went up. If we stigmatize seeking mental health care all in the name of trying to look backwards and say, well, maybe hypothetically this could have helped in this scenario, all we're going to do is ensure that mental health issues go more and more untreated because we're associating a greater stigma. And that's not something I could support. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you so much. There's not a lot I can add to this. I think we're all in quite a bit of agreement. The Constitution of the United States is one of the most remarkable documents in the world. And the Second Amendment exists so that we can protect the rights that Constitution grants us. The left is so good at controlling the narrative. They've got all the right buzzwords, they appeal to all the right emotions, but they're not on the right side of the law. They just aren't. And we, as conservatives, need to stand up a lot better for ourselves and a lot better for our issues. We tend to let them run over us when it comes to the narrative. And we're on the right side of this. And we need to be more bold. There's no reason that we can't be bold. We are on the right side of this. In terms of whether it's red flag laws or other laws. First of all, I had the opportunity just recently in the House of Representatives to vote for a bill that loosens laws for concealed weapons. So I was really honored to have that opportunity. The issues that we are trying to address with gun laws, we're not addressing the real issues directly. Mental health is one that was brought up, and that's absolutely right. And the breakdown of the family really contributes to so many of the problems that we have that we could be fixing if the family was intact and if our children were taken care of from the time they were born until the time they left our homes. Then we wouldn't have these issues that we have with gun safety, and we wouldn't have the issues that we have in education and schools, and we wouldn't have so many of these issues. So you can't legislate that. So it's important to have conversations and to see what we can do to create some band-aids, but the real problems are the most difficult ones to address, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much. I'm going to skip a topic, and I don't know about time, and I want to go to something that's obviously very near and dear to us, as it was President Trump, and that's our southern border. So there's a three-part question in here. First is going to be, what is your stance on legal immigration? Legal immigration, not illegal aliens, legal immigration. What's your stance on that? And keep it at our current level, increase it, or reduce the level of legal immigrants is kind of where I'm thinking, as well as your stance on it. Also, do you believe we need to further secure our southern border via wall and technology? And then, if possible, would you support some law which would stop federal funding going to cities, townships, counties, and states that refuse to follow federal law? Obviously, I'm talking about sanctuary, fill in the blank, or as many try to call them, like Kalamazoo, welcoming cities. Because they weren't welcoming prior to that. So 3 parts. Immigration, the southern border, say what would you like on that, and then are you for a law that would stop funding to these sanctuary cities, townships, or states that refuse to follow the law?
Okay, so first, legal immigration. I support legal immigration. As a business owner, one of the biggest challenges I have today is hiring people. We struggle every day trying to get people to show up to work. The ones typically that are unemployed today are unemployed for a reason. So if there's a way that we can get legal immigration, I think the president supports legal immigration. He talked about that. That's up to Congress. Congress has to fix the immigration laws and create better legal immigration. I think we're a country of immigrants, and if you do it legally, I think everybody is welcoming. The border wall, I 100% support the border wall. I mean, we have to, in order to have immigration fixed, you need to stop the people at the border. You need to fix the immigration laws, and you need to stop providing incentive for these people to drag their kids from Central America through Mexico. You know, 1/3, 1 out of 3 women and young girls that come on that trek are assaulted or raped as they come across there. And we have Democrats during a Democrat debates that when they're asked who supports free health care for illegal immigrants, they all raise their hand. What kind of incentive are we providing for these people to come across here? And they should be ashamed of themselves for what they're doing to those kids and young girls as they're coming across there. So I think the border wall is absolutely necessary. We need to fix the immigration. And what was the last one? I'm sorry.
Sanctuary cities and the funding.
Sanctuary cities. It's ridiculous. I'm a reserve deputy for the Kent County Sheriff Department. Law enforcement is law enforcement. I'm so tired of people saying they're not going to cooperate with ICE because ICE is trying to enforce immigration laws. The laws are written by Congress. If these guys, these immigration guys, the sheriffs, the police, they're trying to enforce. They're called law enforcement for a reason. They're enforcing the laws that are written in Congress. Congress needs to take charge of this stuff. They need to fix it, and we need to quit having people that disregard the law. If you disregard the law, you should go to jail, period.
Thank you. We're going to add another minute because I needed a 3-part question. That's what that was there. So we'll go 3 minutes. Again, now to you, Jim. What is your stance on immigration? Keep it at current level, legal, increase or reduce? Do you believe on further securing our southern border via wall and technology? We got to make sure we throw that in there. And then your stance on stopping federal funding for these cities, townships, or states.
So I'm going to go kind of quickly on the first 2, and then I want to expand on the third one because it's something I've worked on a lot when it comes to sanctuary cities. So number 1, on legal immigration, like most people, that's something I support. One thing I'd like to see, though, is there not to be incentives and programs tailored towards even legal immigrants that come here that place them above existing American citizens. I don't think that's a fair use of our tax dollars. Thank you. And same goes for the border wall. I support the border wall 100% and other means necessary to secure the border, but it goes right along with that. We should also take away the incentives for illegal immigrants to come here as well, because there's a lot of programs out there to help them go to college for free and health care. And if you look at the Democrats, as was mentioned, they want to give them everything for free when there's people who are paying taxes here who aren't getting those programs. So it's just ridiculous. Now, in sanctuary cities 2 years ago, the city of Lansing tried to become a sanctuary city. And I stepped forward as chair of the House Local Government Committee and put a stop to that right away. We had what was actually a raucous hearing on that issue and on some bills to ban sanctuary cities in the state of Michigan. And we passed that out of committee to the floor, and Lansing pulled back on that. So it's an issue I have a lot of experience with. Recently, the Detroit Public Schools want to enact a similar policy, something we hadn't thought of, a sanctuary school. So they want to have illegal immigrant children going there, getting a per pupil allowance, tax dollars from the state for free, just like these college programs. And it's something we absolutely need to, that is not fair to people who are paying taxes. It's certainly not fair to the 3rd District. When you look at the funding is done on a per pupil basis. So why Detroit is doing this, they want kids, illegal immigrants, to come in there, and then they get more funding from the state as a result from that. And the pie is only so big, so it actually takes money away from people who are following the laws around here. So I introduced a bill recently to put a stop to that. And the final point, Kent County Jail has a policy where they won't communicate or cooperate with ICE. So in the budget that we just passed, my friend and colleague, State Representative Thomas Elbert, chairs the corrections budget. He and I worked together with Senator Barrett to put language in there to ban that type of policy. So if you're going to run that, now unfortunately the governor vetoed it. It was one of the reasons she vetoed a lot of things in the budget, but she vetoed this language in the budget because she thinks that jails ought to decide whether or not they're going to communicate and cooperate with ICE. So this is something I provided a lot of leadership on. It's something I think is absolutely important to our national security of our country. And again, when I was gearing up to run against Congressman Amash, he's been really weak on the border. He's been weak on, 16-year-olds voting, illegal immigrants voting, you name it. There, open borders. He always sides with the Democrats on those issues, and it's something that absolutely needs to change in the 3rd District and in the country. Thank you.
So would you be open to a law that would take federal funding away from cities, townships, and states? That
absolutely. The way
Joel, did you say I didn't?
Since
you would be too.
Yeah,
okay.
I just want to expand real quick. Real quick. So yes, I would support that. But the way we structure it with mine, I think, is arguably better. It fines the people who are putting the policy in place and penalizes them monetarily. So if you're a city council member and you vote to put that in place, or you're running the city, you get dinged in your pocketbook. I think it's the only way to get their attention. Okay. Because if it's other people's money, they don't care about other people's money.
All right.
So if I may, I'll kind of go in reverse order. I'm not a fan of federal overreach, but when the recipient of federal dollars says, well, what gives you the right to tell me what to do? Because you're getting money. That money is a string. That could be tied back. And I think I don't know why it's controversial to say that if you're charged with enforcing or promulgating laws and you're promoting lawlessness, that's not going to be rewarded with federal funding. So that is a resounding yes on the first. When it comes to securing the border, again, I don't understand how it's controversial. I don't understand how Democrats have gone from saying, well, of course, that's just common sense, to now just shooting off to the left and getting us to a point where just wanting to secure the border has all of a sudden made a political issue rather than just a practical, realistic, we need to do this. So wall, yes. Surveillance, yes. Drones, everything we can do, because this is why I wanted to answer that in reverse order, because if we're going to have a strong and effective legal immigration system, we need to be securing that border, or else it'll just be porous and full of holes. So I support legal immigration. My wife is an immigrant. She came here legally. I was proud to watch my mother and father-in-law get their citizenship this year and last year, to watch my wife get her citizenship 3 years ago. No thanks to me, she already had a green card. I can't take any credit. But when it comes to what the right number is for this country, I don't believe it should be the federal government sitting there and saying, oh, 140,000, oh, 150,000. The federal government needs to control security, and they need to control citizenship. I want the states to make that determination, rather than just saying, hey, Arkansas, here's 15,000 people, figure out what to do with them. Talk to your representatives. Have the government be responsible. Separate citizenship and a pathway to citizenship from folks who are coming in here to support businesses, as Joel mentioned. Make sure that the folks who are coming are not there to take jobs away from Americans, but are there to help build businesses that will employ even more Americans. I had a relative who had a business up in the Traverse City area. He was getting seasonal workers every year. He had 20 visas. It was guys going for 10 years. Those 20 seasonal workers supported 30 full-time American workers. All of a sudden, the federal government changed the determination how they interpreted the law. 20 went to 2, and he tripled the salary. He went recruiting in Detroit, Chicago, couldn't find the people, had to lay off those 30 Americans. I do not understand how that can be considered a functioning system. We need to make sure our immigration system works for the U.S. and not for everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you.
All 4 of my grandparents were immigrants. They could not wait to become American citizens. They worked hard, they built businesses, they sent their sons to war, they built communities. They would be appalled to see and hear what's happening here today. They'd be appalled. We need to be the welcoming country that we are for those who come here legally. For those who come here illegally, we need to enforce our laws. We are a nation of laws, and we can't be bypassing those laws for people from other countries who aren't coming here legally. I went to the border because I wanted to see for myself. And I saw the problems that it is a porous border already. We have border patrol stations that are not manned because they're too busy taking care of the crisis of the border. This is a crisis. The president has been calling this a crisis for a long time. It's a humanitarian crisis and it's a national security crisis. And the Dems are finally figuring that out, but they're only addressing the humanitarian crisis. They don't believe that there's a national security crisis, so I'm going to tell you that there is. The ICE agents that I talked to, one of them had just escorted a known terrorist back to his home country on the continent of Africa 2 weeks prior to that. In one of the ICE facilities that I went to, they spoke 65 languages. 65 languages in one thing. So we're a nation of laws. We need to abide by those laws. We need to support our legal immigrants. I'm going to forget what the questions are.
The question was, what is your stance on legal immigration?
Okay, and now the wall. So
then sanctuary cities and the wall.
So I saw the wall in El Paso, and I talked to the border agents and the ICE agents, and they don't know what they would do without that wall. Of course we need a wall, whether it's a wall or technology or whatever it is that's a barrier, but we need the barrier to protect our national security. And sanctuary cities are ridiculous, and I would stop funding them for everything.
What about welcoming cities, though?
Huh?
Welcoming city. Kalamazoo is not a sanctuary city, it's a welcoming city.
See, this is often how they win the narrative. They figure out how to say things in ways that make it sound so much more appealing, but it's not real. So, no. Go to them.
Thanks, Lynn. I like having fun on air. I always say on air, well, apparently Kalamazoo and Battle Creek were not welcoming prior to that, which is kind of sad, isn't it? Tom, thank you.
First time I was at the border, I was 12 years old. My grandfather used to run a tour company from McAllen through Guadalajara and took retirees across the border. I got to experience the families in Mexico sitting out there making tortillas and everything else, so I got to really experience the culture. We do need a border wall, but my opinion of the border wall is slightly different than everybody else's. I think if we build the border wall, we're going to be able to drive the price of drugs up, helping address the crisis we have here in the United States with cocaine, with heroin, and with marijuana. One of the drugs is going to end up legal, but the other two, we need to stop. And the other thing is, what will happen is those nations will stabilize by building that wall so that the immigration level decreases. Because when they come here legally, they're entrepreneurs. A lot of them have started businesses. Heck, some of us eat at their restaurants, right? Yeah. They almost all of us like a good burrito on occasion, but they also have tire shops and they've built factories. So when it comes to illegal immigration, what we need to do in the United States is remove all of the tax incentives, because a lot of these folks have tax breaks for a period of time, some of them up to 7 years, to come here. So we need to remove those tax breaks. Americans don't get them. The other thing we need to do is make sure that they learn basic English, the U.S. Constitution, and basic American history. Yeah. And then they can come on in. Because the only way you're going to respect a nation is if you learn about that nation. So that's what we need to do with legal immigration. But the wall needs to be built to address other issues as well. Sanctuary cities should be defunded, period. Send the money to other spots. You sit there and you look at all the things that this nation does. We used to have Ellis Island, and people came here and they busted their butt to learn English. And there was a reason that they did it. It was for the economic opportunity. So let's not take it away, because I remember a pregnant woman with a trash bag crossing that river when I was a little kid, coming back across with my grandfather. And they were picked up by the agents on the other side, but they were swimming across the Rio Grande. If we reformed it so people can come in legally, learning American history, learning our traditions, learning our culture, learning our language, that pregnant woman wouldn't have been swimming across the Rio Grande with a trash bag. She would have sat there and busted her butt like the folks did when they came through Ellis Island and all the other ports in the United States to come in here and be an American the legal way. So we need to build the wall, reform our immigration laws so that the poor person can actually come in here legally and respecting the United States of America and defund sanctuary cities.
Thanks a lot, Tom. And again, I want to compliment these guys. They're doing great rocking and rolling. You just made me think of something real quickly, if I may. You talked about learning English. I have a little personal story to tell you. My grandfather came through Ellis Island at the age of 18 from Romania. He came to visit, his father who was already here. I went back 30, 40 years later, when I was older, we went to, early 90s, went to Romania. My mother couldn't speak a darn thing, yet her mother and father spoke English. Her father Romanian. Her father would not allow Romanian to be spoken in the house in front of the kids because they wanted the kids to assimilate here into America. So that's an interesting point you brought up about that. Now, real quickly then, let's go to healthcare. What do you, Jim, I think you're up. What do you see as our government's role in healthcare, and what would have to happen for you to be willing to accept a single-payer system?
First of all, I wouldn't support a single-payer system, period. I think that's terrible. I think that's a huge intrusion into the free market, and it's just a massive government takeover. Gives the government even more power over our lives to make decisions for us on our health care, on our doctor, and who's going to get treatment and who's not. I think that's a terrible idea, so I wouldn't support it. I think on health care, one of the biggest things Obamacare did was it hurt businesses, and it also hurt consumers who were trying to make choices. You could actually, prior to Obamacare, buy a much cheaper policy because the federal government now dictates minimum things that have to be in your policy that a lot of people don't need or don't want to buy coverage for. So that actually drove up rates when it's allegedly the Affordable Care Act. So it did the opposite in a lot of cases. It made health care less affordable. It also froze out a lot of competition because there was a lot of businesses that couldn't comply with the bureaucracy involved in it. So there's now less health insurance companies. So a lot of times when we talk about health care, we talk about insurance, we're trying to figure out a way to essentially socialize the cost and spread that amongst everybody. I think we need to refocus the conversation on the actual cost of the procedures like we did with the auto no-fault debate that we recently got done, and people are going to start seeing some real rate relief in their auto insurance rates come next year. So that's something that I want to do at the federal level, because we always talk about insurance and how are we going to get people insurance so then they can afford the insurance policy to pay for the healthcare procedures where the cost is going up and up and up and up. We need to worry about the cost of the procedures because that drives the cost of the health insurance. And we also need to have more competition in the insurance market and let consumers decide, which doctors they want to see and what types of coverages they do and don't want. Because frankly, there's a lot of things that single people don't need coverage for, and we should be making those decisions, not the federal government. So it's very scary that the Democrats have really controlled this narrative for a long time and have made it all about insurance and who's going to get insurance. People don't have insurance. We need to subsidize that so they can buy it. And really the problem, there's not very much transparency when it comes to pricing in healthcare. Think of the last time you went to the doctor. You have no idea what the actual cost of that procedure was. It's really the only thing in the marketplace where that's the case.
All right, thank you, Pete. Again, the question is, what do you see as our government's role in healthcare, and what would you have to see happen to be willing to accept or be open to a single-payer system?
And when you say single payer, you're not talking about Medicare, Medicaid, and the VA.
Government, just as a government.
As a
There's a
national.
reason I'm asking this question, I'll tell you at the end, but it could be Medicare for all, whatever you want to call it, it's run by the government.
Yeah. Well, right now, healthcare spending through Medicare, Medicaid, Veterans Administration, DOD, it's not a single line item, it's spread across a bunch of different agencies, but we're talking about $1.2 trillion annually. Public and private healthcare spending combined in a decade will probably be expected to be around $10 trillion. That's a third of our overall economy only in healthcare. That is a tremendous problem, and the answer isn't to cut benefits. It's not to cut Social Security. It's not to cut Medicare and Medicaid. It's to find ways of achieving more efficient costs. 30% of that spending is on administrative costs. It's on people opening up, scanning documents. How many times have you gone from one provider to another and had to have them fax your medical record in 2019? The biggest item that we can address is on that cost side, and the biggest driver of costs is the federal government being a source of basically writing a blank check and not asking where that money is going, right? We have that same problem, honestly, with a lot of companies. If you have healthcare that's provided by your employer, you don't see how much that employer is actually paying for that. We need to get a mentality of thrift, a mentality of responsibility, and a lot of that comes with removing the federal government, again, not from paying, but from paying without consequence, from not trying to drive those costs lower and lower. They should be using their money, they should be using taxpayer money as efficiently as taxpayers would use our own money if we were paying for something. So I don't support single payer. It's really hard for me to see a world in which I could, for that same reason. Obamacare locked in high costs, and they just made everybody pay for it, rather than trying to get to the source and get those costs down. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. All right, Lynn, what do you see as our government's role in healthcare, and what would you have to see happen to be open to accepting single-payer healthcare?
Well, I think I'll address that last one first, and I think Hal would have to freeze over before they accepted single payer. It would not work. When you buy a loaf of bread, or you go get your oil changed, or you buy a couch, you price shop. You know what things cost, and you price shop, just like they have many of my colleagues up here have mentioned. We just don't. We don't know that. We don't have that kind of transparency in our system right now. We don't have the transparency, and we don't have the accountability in government. So I think that we just have to remove government. That we need the free market to rule more strongly in our healthcare system. We need government to get out. We need government regulations to get out, and we need to let the free market rule.
All right, thank you, Tom.
Well, healthcare, years and years and years ago, you used to be able to walk into your doctor and just pay your doctor directly. We've removed the doctor-patient relationship. That's going to drive up costs because you have all these gatekeepers in the way. And like they were saying, $10 trillion of the U.S. economy being private. So one of the things that we need to start doing is actually re-increasing the doctor-patient relationship, where the prices are actually posted at the different doctors. And then you can actually sit there and do the reviews of whether the doctor's good or bad, because sometimes you get what you pay for. The other thing that we need to sit there and look at doing is actually allowing people in groups of like 4 and 5 and 6 to create health insurance co-ops and purchase health insurance independently, because right now the government regulations don't allow you to do that. So government's in the way of actual group purchasing power. The next thing we need to do is actually just repeal Obamacare completely. It's failed miserably. Nobody's talking about it anymore. The Republican Party's lied to us. The Democrats don't want to do a damn thing about it. They want to make sure that we're going to pay more. The point of Obamacare was to get us to a single-payer system by bankrupting us. And it didn't do it because the American economy is resilient. So now we actually have to build a backbone and repeal the thing so we can get back to the doctor-patient relationship, have these co-ops. Then we need to do tort reform. There's some people that come in and sit there and they will lie to one doctor, go to another doctor, and they'll get pills from 3 or 4 different doctors and then try to sue the first doctor for giving them the wrong medication. You should be responsible for yourself when you do that. That's a mental disease. So there's a lot of things that we can do. And the Republican Party keeps being moved by the Democrats because they keep moving the goalposts. So now what we need to do is slap them and move the goalposts back and start getting back 5 yards at a time.
Okay, so the problem, again, we have here is a narrative problem. We talk about health care, and it's really health insurance. We talk about one of the major problems that we have, or one of the solutions, I guess, is just like we said earlier, to have government get out of the way. Let the free market dictate what's going on. One of the things that President Trump has talked about is transparency. There's not a product that you pay for that you go in and say, I'll have one of those and I don't care how much it costs, or I don't want to know how much it costs, just give me one of those. So if we had transparency where someone had to get an appendectomy and they called this hospital, how much is it? And they told them they could call this hospital over here and find out how much it is over there. They could make a choice. And what that would do would be drive down the cost. Right now, you go in, I have insurance that covers like an emergency room visit. I go in there and I pay my deductible for my emergency room. When it's all said and done, I get a bill from the emergency room that is covered by insurance, but then I get a bill from a doctor who's not part of the emergency room. Well, wait a minute, he saw me in the emergency room, but that's not part of it. So that's the struggle that we have. There's a inherent non-transparent process involved. They charge you whatever they want, whenever they want. Single payer, here's an example. I went and visited a company who's got 2 employees that have a liver disease, and they have to have a particular drug. This company self-insures to a certain point. They get $7,000 a month it costs them for this disease. There's 2 people that get it. They can actually literally fly him to British Virgin Islands, get their pills there. He can pay for the private jet, bring them back, and save money. I said, well, why don't you send them to Canada? They can buy it over there. You can't buy it in Canada because they're a single payer system. This drug is too expensive, so it's not available. That's what you get when you have a single payer system. Certain things are cut out. If the government is in charge, certain things will get cut out. So
all right, thanks a lot. Just so I can explain myself, and again, you guys are bringing us up and bringing us a good part. You're talking about the narrative, and that's what we as conservatives have to do. We have to learn the narrative, and the reason I asked the question, what would you have to happen to be willing to accept a single-payer system? It wasn't a gotcha question, it was this. It's teaching everybody, just like the gun laws. You don't have to argue face-to-face. What gun laws do you see that's actually working? Give me a gun law that's working, and we'll talk about that. And they're not going to be able to come up with one, or those will make it up. Same thing as this, single-payer health system. Say, all right, and again, if you guys listen to my show, you learn a lot of this stuff. You say this, you say, all right, on single-payer health system, well, let's try first all these free market things, and if that doesn't work, then we'll talk about the single-payer health system. That's where I was going with that one, and it wasn't trying to be a gotcha. All right, Hal, why are you raising?
For the gun law didn't work. Mandatory ownership.
Oh, all right. Being Mr. Funny here. All right, let's go into, we have about, 15 minutes left until we get questions from you guys, so get your questions going. You guys touched on this a little bit, but I do want to zero in on it because it's a hot topic and it's something that President Trump is taking a lot of heat on, and he's going to need support from one of you guys when one of you ends up winning. Are you in agreement with President Trump's tactics of using tariffs to gently persuade other countries to reach fair trade agreements with the United States? And along with that, piggybacked on that, is what is your understanding of free trade, and what would you want the administration to strive for in their trade negotiations?
So, thank you. The word tactics is right. Not strategy, not what our overall goal is, but how we get to that goal, the tactic that we employ. I support the president using tariffs as a tactic. He used that effectively to negotiate a strong USMCA agreement. He got those tactical tariffs in so that he could make sure that at the very end, it was the optimal agreement for the US. Now, naturally, Nancy Pelosi's sitting on it, not taking it up because they don't care about the health, they care about the economy. But that is how tariffs should be used. And again, when it comes to China, tactical tariffs so that all the Chinese state-owned enterprises that have access to cheaper financing than a normal publicly traded company would, tactical tariffs to level the playing field with all of the intellectual property theft that the Chinese government has been going and stealing from the US. I mean, probably one of the largest heists in world history, upwards of $1 trillion of intellectual property that's gone from the West to China in the past 20 years. Tactical tariffs to even that playing field. And there were a lot of folks who were doubters on the president's tariffs early on. You can look at a lot of the economists who were saying negative things back then, who have come around and are basically saying, yeah, you know what? We like this. This is good. The president has been the first president in ever, really, since the rise of China, to actually push back forcefully on the Chinese and the way that they have managed their economy to the detriment of the United States. So again, as a strategy, we get to a point where we don't need tariffs, but realistically, we're living in the real world, using them to correct the unequal treatment that the U.S. has gotten so that we're on a level playing field and that our companies have every right to compete in the global sphere as others do as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Pete. Lynn, the question was, are you in agreement with the president's tactics in using the tariffs to reach these fair trade agreements? And what is a fair trade agreement in your mind?
Well, I absolutely support the president. I can't remember a time that I felt so more proud of where we're headed on the global stage. I feel like we've regained strength, and I feel like we are the respect for us as a business entity, as a global partner, is becoming stronger and stronger because this man is not afraid to put his foot down. This man is not afraid to draw lines in the sand, and this man is not afraid to curtail unfair trade and to make sure that trade is that the trade is fair. I mean, free trade is fair trade, right? And I think getting the government out of that to the extent that we can always, we have too many government regulations, and this is another thing that this president has done as he continues to wean our dependency, our historic dependency on regulation. So I absolutely support him, and I think that we're becoming a stronger, more respected nation because of it. It is oftentimes short-term pain for long-term gain, but I think that Americans understand what that means and how to get through that.
Thank you, Lynn. Do you need to repeat other questions? No?
So I'm pretty sure I've talked about tariffs already early on, but I can elaborate a little bit more. Bill Clinton sold the American auto worker, the American factory worker down the river back in the 1990s when he signed NAFTA. We surrendered at that point, saying that we weren't going to do tariffs and that we were all free traders, and for decades, your jobs aren't coming back. You need to find new skill sets. You need to do this. You need to do that. Now when you drive around, and I'm down here all the time, I'm all over West Michigan constantly with my job, and you sit there and you sit across the table from folks, their kids have jobs locally again. They're not moving away. The economy is exploding. Factories are reopening. My wife is from Belding. That town was devastated after NAFTA in the late 1990s. It was destroyed. Electrolux closed that factory before they closed Greenville's, where Laura's dad worked. Free trade can only work if both countries are applying free trade. The President of the United States is using this tactic extremely effectively. He's using it in a way where these factories reopen, because when you drive into Belding now, some of those old factories, they have factories in them. And they said those jobs weren't coming back, and they have. So when you're sitting here, it's not just about supporting the president's tactic. It's going to be people who understand that tactic because they're with people and they've raised in that background, understanding the cause and human effect of screwing the American worker. That was done by the establishment of both parties for decades. And Donald Trump is the biggest screw you to him. And that's why I'm going to fight for those tariffs as well.
Thank you very much. Joel? Again, your discussion on his tactics, using his tactics. Do you like him, not like him? How could he do better, or what have you? As well as, what does free trade mean to you? What would it be an agreement that would mean free trade?
Okay, so he is the negotiator in chief, and this is how he wins. He negotiates, and that's what he's done with China. He has taken it back. The only people that are upset about the tariffs are the ones who don't understand it, or the ones like Justin Amash, whose businesses rely on Chinese imports. That's why he's upset about it. And another big issue is we need to remain competitive. If there is free trade, which is what I support, the American worker will outproduce any worker in the world. But if we have stuff like this Green New Deal they're talking about, Green New Deal that the Democrats want, is going to impose all kinds of additional costs and inefficiencies on America so that China becomes more competitive. And so that India becomes more competitive. So other people in the world is more competitive. We have to be very careful about the talk about this Green New Deal. I am convinced it's being pushed by our friends in Beijing. And because what they want to do is make us less efficient so they can compete on a global basis against us. Right now, if we have free trade, and I'm proud of our American workers, and I know they can do better than anybody in the world. That's what we have, free trade. Again, the tariffs, negotiator-in-chief, I support my president. He's going to do what he has to do to win for America. Anyone in here tired of winning yet? No. Because we're winning. And I support our president, and I'd like to thank him.
Thank you, Jim.
So first of all, where I think we should head on the overall policy as it relates to free trade is what the president's #1 campaign promise was when he ran in 2016, that was putting America first. So putting American workers first in any of these trade deals, whether it's with China or Mexico or any country we're dealing with, making sure that we're getting the best end of that deal and the best end of that bargain. I think it's very clear the president understands the concept of leverage when you're in a negotiation, and that's why he's using these tactics to get what American people want. So of course I support that. He has, just a few levers to pull, and this is one of them, and it's clearly worked out very well. I think there's an opportunity here, excuse me, as you guys can tell, I've had a little bit of a cold. There's an opportunity here to draw a contrast between all of us and Justin Amash, because Justin Amash is 100% about free trade without tariffs or anything, to the point where it doesn't even matter if it harms American workers and American businesses and American jobs. That's what he's done. So maybe it's because of the factory in China, that could be, but even if you take him at his word and it has to do with the orthodoxy of his worldview, it's still bad for American workers either way. So I think we've got a big contrast here on this. I do support the tactics the president's using. I'm excited that it's working out well for the 3rd District and for Michigan and America.
Thank you. One of the reasons I asked, what do you guys understand of free trade and what do we want in administration to see free trade? And again, it's for you guys is this. He's just asking for, hey, if you're going to charge us 25%, we're going to charge you 25%. That's what you got to remember, okay? If you want to charge us 0, we'll charge you 0. Remember that. All right, I have 2 questions to pick from. I want 1-minute responses, then we're going to go to you guys in the crowd. I couldn't decide which one, but I'm going to go with, the one I'm not going to go with is because Justin's probably going to see this. Hey, Justin, can you reply to my request for coming on air? If Justin runs as an independent, this is not going to be for you to answer because I don't want him to find out. If he doesn't decide to run as an independent, how do you plan on dealing with that very real possibility that he would be taking some votes away from you and giving it to that Democrat a clear path to victory? So keep that in mind. But we don't want to give that up because I'm sure he's going to be watching this. So 1 minute each. If elected, what would be your first legislative effort? I know you'd be 1 of 435, but if you could, what would you want to work on first? Back to you, Lynn. Go ahead.
I think that I would want to work on immigration. I think that I think that crisis is very real. That national security crisis is very real, and I think that's where I would go first.
Awesome. Thank you.
I know it's only one, but I can probably tie it in a little bit. First one, make sure to fire off Justin Amash's staff and hire people that are going to answer the damn phone.
I'm not sure that really qualifies as a legislative action. Probably a good idea. That's a good question, and I thought about that. I think attacking the opioid crisis, which is a big crisis in our country right now, and the reason why that is because I think Democrats can agree to it. And one of the problems we have in Congress is it's broken. People aren't talking to each other. If we have common issues, we ought to be able to solve them. And I think that's one everybody can get behind, and that's where I think we need to start is coming up with, without giving up our principles, coming up with issues that we can agree on, and that's one of them.
Thank you. Jim?
So if President Trump is reelected, I think there's a very good chance he'll retake the majority in the U.S. House of Representatives, and Nancy Pelosi will no longer be the Speaker. So that said, I think let's get the USMCA passed first. As soon as she's gone, bam, that goes into effect, and that's really good for the economy. It's definitely very good for West Michigan and for trade. So that'd probably be #1. Right after that, let's work on the border wall, because that goes to Joel's issue, obviously, on the opioid crisis. That's fueled by all the cheap heroin coming in from Mexico and other people and other places. That's devastated rural Michigan, and a lot of the 3rd District is rural. It's a problem in the inner cities too, but if you look in the communities on the outskirts of Grand Rapids, a lot of people are dying of drug overdoses, so I agree with them on that issue as well.
Awesome, thanks, Pete.
Well, I won't repeat any of the great answers because I second all of those. Something that hasn't been mentioned that I'm very passionate about, automatic sunset laws. Start to peel back a lot of the federal overreach by saying if you're going to pass a law, it's got to be up for review. So much of our system right now is dictated by what a bunch of folks in the 60s thought was the best way to run our government for a decade or two, and we took that to mean let's go on for 50 or 100 years. Clean it up, clean house, and let's make sure that our laws work for this country.
Thank you guys. You guys did wonderful today. We're going to take some questions from the audience. One thing I would like to piggyback off, I think Joel said, yes, we do need to reach out. All of us, I hope I can speak for us as conservatives, we want you guys not to, once you're there, one of you are there, not to bend over and take it like so many have in the past, but look for ways to reach out. Because as I reported and wrote about today, there was a poll out there, 7 out of 10 people think we're on the edge of a civil war. 7 out of 10 Americans. That is sad. And though we want you to fight hard for us, and if you're going to run against stupidity and insanity like Schiff and Pelosi and Schumer and those people, fine, but then hopefully you can find people who aren't at that level of ridiculousness to work with. I do agree with that, and you brought that up, Joel. I like that. Anybody for questions now?
Can I have the first question right?
Well, since you're the boss of this, yeah.
The first question I have is for each one of you, and that is that there are so many issues that we didn't have the time to get into tonight. I'm looking for all 5 of you to come back here in early summer, maybe spring, as a second visitation, and let us
Grill you
some
again?
other issues. So I'd like to see a hand raised of each one of you that will join us again.
Right. One of them can sit there. No, I'm not talking that. All right, real quickly, anybody in the audience that has, all right, I saw your hand go up first. Your name, sir?
Bob Vanderbilt, Berry County. Lynn mentioned balanced budget, and I want to know what each one of their position is on calling constitutional convention.
To balance the budget?
Yeah.
All right, we're going to give him 1 minute. 1 minute. Well, let's try to go in order. It's Tom. Yeah.
An Article 5 convention is extremely dangerous because you don't know what California is going to do, you don't know what Massachusetts is going to do, and once you do it, it's going to go unhinged. There is a clause in the United States Constitution called the Expandix Clause where 2/3 of the states can amend the United States Constitution. It's been done a couple of times. We removed slavery, women's suffrage, you probably heard of a couple of these amendments. Yeah. But we can pass a balanced budget amendment without doing a constitutional convention. It's extremely dangerous because you're playing with fire. It was put there as a fail-safe by the Founding Fathers, period. So the balanced budget amendment, we can pass it. We need to start putting it on the ballot state by state by state until 2/3 actually have a majority so it's on the U.S. Constitution.
All right, thank you.
I think Tom said it very well. It is dangerous, and we have a bunch of, when you look at the Electoral College and the color of who elected our president, it's very red, but there are some blue. In New York, California, there's some crazy people in our country, and we need to recognize that. So I agree with Tom that that's the right way to do it. We can make it happen. I fully support a balanced budget. I think it's important. None of you people live on a credit card. I don't know how we can expect our government to live on a credit card. We need to cut the credit card out. It has to stop. We continue to deficit spend because they're spending your money. They're not spending their own money.
Right.
And we need to get serious about this conversation.
I think we have our first point of major disagreement. I think this process is very misunderstood. It takes 3/4 of all the states to ratify any amendments to the U.S. Constitution, 3/4. And whether you're Justin Amash or me or whoever gets elected, you can introduce a balanced budget amendment any day that you're in Congress. And a constitutional convention is no different. If you have a constitutional convention, they propose amendments, they have to go to the states for 3/4 for ratification. So this effort that's been being done across the country is for term limits, and it's to propose a balanced budget amendment. Excuse me, again, I'm sorry I mentioned my cold earlier. So that's something I've supported at the state level in the past. I co-sponsored the resolution in the House last term. I think it's a good idea because it raises the profile of the issue. And obviously Congress isn't going to get off their butt and send it to the states for ratification. So this is a way to circumvent Congress's inability to get anything done on that and allow the individual states to propose the amendments. It takes 2/3 to do that, and then it goes to the states themselves at a 3/4 threshold for approval. So I don't know why a lot of people are spreading this fear related to it, because they would have to be ratified by 3/4. So there's no danger to it.
So we need to get towards a balanced budget. If we passed a balanced budget amendment tomorrow, one of two things would need to happen. We need to find $1 trillion or $1.2 trillion in new taxes and new revenue for the government, or we need to cut $1.2 trillion in spending from the government. That's either going to come from, it can't come from just cutting our Defense Department, because that's only $785 billion. It can't come from just cutting all Medicare and Medicaid, because that's only $1 trillion. So it's either huge taxes or huge cuts. Now, we need to get there, and we need to move towards that as an objective. I'm skeptical on, in the short term, passing a balanced budget amendment, because it either means more taxes or cutting bone on services that so many Americans are relying on, like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. But we need to get there, and I think we can do it in 10 years. And it's going to be challenging, and it's going to require a lot of bipartisan cooperation. And I think there's areas to be found for that, and that's what I want to work towards. Thank you.
Well, as you already know, I support a balanced budget amendment. I think that's important. And the truth of the matter is, I'm not quite sure how I feel about a constitutional convention. We've been having conversations about that. I think about it. I think that they've all made good points. I'm concerned about the influence of other areas, areas that I don't have a lot of faith in. But I also think there are safeguards. So I can't say that I'd make that decision. I'm sorry.
All right, thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Melody, but it's actually my daughter, who's 17, who has this question. And I think that's important to know because...
Come on, get involved. You ask. No? All right.
Because she's our new generation coming up here. And a lot of us in some of these newer, younger generations have some different issues with healthcare. We like things the holistic way. We like things like we have no healthcare. For 6 years we've had no health care, and we're perfectly okay with that in my family. So this might be an odd question for some people, but
What's the question?
vaccines. Would you continue to support waivers and choice, or would we be forced, just as New York is being forced, to go against parental rights and to go against our freedoms that we have in this country and put us into that same box?
So you're against the forced vaccines, is that what I'm hearing? So you would be for not allowing your kids to go to school because they're not vaccinated? No, but I'm saying, but that's something we have to realize, that if we go against that, those kids can't be allowed out in public to possibly hurt other kids. Who's next? Go ahead.
Yeah, so the vaccine issue, it's an interesting, I had a conversation with a what does she call herself? A vaccine whistleblower is what she called herself. And she talked about all the dangers of vaccines and all that kind of stuff. And, polio was all but eradicated because of the polio vaccine. I think there's some value to vaccines. There is some questionable science when it comes to vaccines, whether or not they should be certain vaccines, what side effects they're causing, and so on. But I guess I support vaccinating kids. I get worried as when we talk about illegal immigration, all these kids coming across the border that are carrying disease, and they've not been vaccinated, and they're bringing them into our country, and then we interpopulate them with kids whose parents have chosen not to vaccinate them, and it could be a health crisis. So I guess I support that we continue to work toward vaccinating our kids and make the science more understandable.
So a lot of the waiver process relates to schools, and it's largely controlled by the state. And at the state level, I've supported the current system that we have for waivers, and I wouldn't be in favor of the federal government coming in and dictating how the states are going to handle it. So I guess, long story short, I'm pretty much okay with the status quo. I do agree with, my wife and I vaccinate our kids. I think it is important to do that, but at the same time, having these waivers, I think is important too.
So I'm probably the only person on this stage who's actually vaccinated people. I vaccinated a couple of dozen of kids in South Sudan during a refugee crisis there, and watched mothers die of easily preventable diseases because they didn't have, in the places they were fleeing, the medical care that they needed. To Jim's point, this is mostly a state issue. On the medical side, I think the status quo is pretty effective. It does work. There should be some exemptions, some waivers, but it should be very narrowly tailored. My sister considers herself a vaccine truther. It's really challenging because I know when my wife and I have children, I'm going to be worried about her coming to visit because before those kids can get their shots, they could be exposed to illnesses. So I think vaccinations are very important. I think we should have very limited exemptions, but this is mostly an issue that should reside at the state level. Thank you.
And I agree with that. I think that vaccinations are important. I think that should be I think that status quo is good, and I think there ought to be waivers for those who truly need it.
There's a more fundamental question with vaccines that I think is really being ignored. When we start dictating how people raise their kids, the government can dictate everything else. So we're playing with fire in both directions on it. All of my kids are vaccinated. I think that it's fine having a public education system for vaccinations to encourage people to get vaccinated. But for anybody to walk in somebody's house and say your kid's going to take this, it's a line of crap. Government's role should have never have been that. When we defeated polio, the government didn't mandate it. What they did is they went out and educated the society, offered it for free, and they spent money to address the crisis. If we have an outbreak, if we have a new disease pop up, that's how we do it again, is we encourage people to do it. Autism has risen since we started doing vaccines. That's an actual real number. Some of the other stuff, not so much. Some of the other diseases on there on the Truther website, some of those I look at it and I'm like, no, that didn't happen from that. But autism is something that is a direct line on it.
I appreciate that, and again, I'm sorry, I didn't want, if you felt I was being defensive when I said that, no, I just want to make sure all of the issues are on the table, just as your question is legitimate. I'm sorry guys, we hardly even have time. We want to do a little bit of mingling, so we're going to have to cut the closing to 1 minute, so these guys have a chance to speak with you for a few minutes. We have to be out of the room by 9. Or what happens? It explodes?
Yeah, they lock us in forever.
All right, so let's do 1 minute closings and just go with your first.
Well, one issue I want to talk about, one issue that I was surprised didn't come up in the questions a little bit more, and that's the issue of life. I believe that life starts at the moment of conception. I'm very strongly pro-life. I've always been endorsed by Right to Life of Michigan. You've heard me talk about it in some of my answers, so I just want to get that out there because I think it's a really important topic that unfortunately we didn't touch on. I've got petitions here that are going to be out there to sign to help get me on the ballot, so if you guys could sign those for me. We need 1,000 ballot to be on the ballot, so I'd very much appreciate that. Thank you for putting this on. I really appreciate it. It's really nice to see this level of energy in Calhoun County. It's going to be a very important county for the 3rd District, very important county for Trump and for the state of Michigan, because we can take that state house seat back that the Dems got from us 2 years ago, and we can also win the county, which may well be the difference between winning Michigan and sending Donald Trump back to the White House. So thank you for your energy. Thank you for everything you guys are doing in the community. This is a huge turnout. I don't think there's a lot of places around Michigan that would be able to put something like this together this quickly. So thank you for doing that. And I urge you
What have we been lacking in the 3rd District over the past 10 years? I'm not going to wait for you to shout it out because there's probably 50 things, but I think they can be boiled down to 3 fundamental traits. We don't have leadership in Congress that is strong, stable, or effective. Effective on constituent services and looking out for the best interests of the people of West Michigan. Strong in terms of standing up, locking in the president's momentum that he's created so it goes on well past his 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th terms. And stable. Because what does the business community need? What do we all need in our lives? We need to be able to plan. We need the government to be a force that can help us make sure that we know what's going forward rather than uncertainty, rather than a risk. So that's the type of leadership that I want to bring back to West Michigan. Thank you so much for having us here tonight. I look forward to talking to many of you after the show. Thank you.
After the show?
The Live with Rank show.
You know, there's a lot of similarity in the philosophies here. You're going to see a lot of similarity, and we heard that tonight. So what you're going to have to make a decision on is who can get the job done the best, who's got the right kind of experience, who has the demeanor, and who will know how to get it done. So it's going to be a tough decision, and I think we all know that we are fighting for the fabric of this nation. We are, right now, we are at a critical crossroads. I mean, the fact that there was a survey where a great majority of people believe that we're on the precipice of some sort of civil, war, is not surprising to me. So I think that we all have to be mindful that we need people who are going to stand up to the AOCs and the squads of the world, who are fighting for, whose philosophies would make my poor grandparents turn in their grave. I mean, and so that's the decision you're going to have to make. So thank you. Sorry.
Again, for those who haven't figured out my name yet, I'm Norton. Anyway, what we're going to actually have to do is we're going to have to actually fight for America. It's not just about making it great again, because we are a great nation. We're going to continue to be great. Out of everybody in here, I have been the most vocal fighting Rashida Tlaib when she visited our district and literally trashed our police officers. Yeah. So when I get to Washington, I'm going to fight for America and fight those squad members very effectively, because they're going to have somebody that can fight back, that has a backbone. The other thing I'm going to fight for is actual Social Security reform, because that's something everybody's dropping the ball on. I think we need to do privatized accounts and quit retreating from the Democrats so that our kids can have better retirements and we can pull people out of poverty. We need to fight for healthcare reform, and we're going to build the damn wall.
Okay, the 3 things I told you to remember about me: strong work ethic, real world experience, and supporter of the president since day one. I'd like to thank Lynn for endorsing me as the right guy for the job. Thank you.
They're not going to, he's already mad we're in here right now.
She's a nice lady for doing that. So anyway, I'm going to work hard. I'm going to bring real experience to Washington, and I'm going to do what represents the people of the 3rd District.
We went to the last one for a rebuttal. We almost escaped. Go ahead, Lynn.
Here, I just want to thank him for this. Last time that we were in the same room, he said, "I am the 2nd oldest person running for Congress in this room."
Hi. All right, thank you. Hey guys, you guys did a great job. I've done a number of these, and this has actually been the best. We stuck to it, we didn't attack each other too much. Thanks everyone for being here. They wanted us out of here. We could mingle with them kind of at our leavings. We thought we had till 9, not 8:40 or something. Go ahead.
Hey, let's all give Frank a big hand of applause.